Good morning. Happy Saturday. Who's enjoying Holy Week? We wish them a happy Passover. Holy Saturday. Easter is tomorrow, big day. Let's go through where we are right now. The good news is the curve of the increase is continuing to flatten. The number of hospitalizations appears to have hit an apex, and the apex appears to be a plateau, which is what many of the models predicted, that it wasn't going to be a straight up and straight down. It was going to be a straight up. You hit the top number, and then you plateau for a period of time, and that looks like what we are doing. The hospitalization rate is down, and that's important. We have more people getting infected still. We have more people going into the hospitals, but we have a lower number. That's all this is saying, is fewer people are going into the hospitals, still net positive. The 3-day average, which is what we look at, because day-to-day can be somewhat deceiving, especially when you get towards the weekend, because the weekend reporting gets a little different, but all the numbers are on the downward slope. Still, people getting infected, still people going into the hospital, but again, a lower rate of increase. The number of ICU admissions is down. The 3-day average on ICU admissions is down. This is a little deceptive because at one time hospitals had discrete ICU wards or ICU beds. Effectively now in a hospital, all the beds are ICU beds. It's like the entire hospital has turned into an ICU facility. So this distinction is actually, I don't know how enlightening this is. This, however, is still a discrete category, the increase in the number of intubations. And as we've discussed, the intubations are a bad sign from a health diagnostic perspective. And when we talk about the number of deaths, those tend to be people who've been intubated for the longest period of time. So while ICU beds may not mean anything anymore in the hospital system, intubations are still intubations. And this is a very good sign that the intubations are down. We were worried about the spread from New York City to Long Island and upstate. If you look at the bar chart, you can see almost a wave where it did start to move. We have been working very hard in Nassau, Suffolk, Westchester, Rockland, which are the surrounding suburbs to New York City. And so far, we've had hot spots, but we've attacked them aggressively. And we believe that we have stabilized the situation upstate and in the suburbs, which is what you see in that chart. Terrible news is the number of lives lost, 783 yesterday. That is not an all-time high, and you can see that the number is somewhat stabilizing, but it is stabilizing at an horrific rate. 783 people, 777, 799. These are just incredible numbers depicting incredible loss and pain that we really, especially this week, all 783 individuals and their families are in our thoughts and in our prayers. Total number of lives lost, 8,627. That's up from 7,844. People ask, well, when is it over? When is it over? When it is over? And my children ask that every day. I'm sure everyone's living with the same question. Every time you wake up, you say, when does this nightmare end? And everybody wants to hear that it ends in 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks, or here's a date that I can tell you that it's over. Just give me some certainty, some closure, some control of my life back. but I also said from day one, and when I raised my hand to take the oath originally, I would never tell you anything but the truth, even if the truth is inconvenient or painful. Winston Churchill is a hero of mine. His granddaughter, Edwina Sands, sent me a portrait, a tribute to Winston Churchill, and I thank her for that. But Winston Churchill said, now, this is not the end. It is not even the beginning of the end, but it is perhaps the end of the beginning. It's just a great Churchill quote. You know, it's precise and how he uses language. I think that's a fair statement of where we are now. This is the beginning that we are in. This was a beginning phase. We're all trying to figure it out. We're all trying to adjust. But it's the end of that beginning phase. What do we do now? We stay the course. What we're experiencing is a product of our actions, period. We do something different, you will see a different reaction in those numbers. Everyone wants to turn to the question of when do we reopen? I get it. I think the first caution for me is, as we enter this new phase of reopen, when do we do it? How do we do it? This person's opinion is here, this person's opinion is here. The best thing we have done to date is we have kept politics out of the discussion. Even though this is a hyper-partisan time, even though we're in the middle of a presidential election, even though it's one of the ugliest political periods I can recall, we have kept politics out of this crisis. And I've worked very hard to do that. I've worked very hard to keep myself out of the politics. I have no personal politics, not running for anything. I'm governor of New York, thank you, and that's where I'm going to stay. I've worked very hard with the President of the United States. We've had our political differences in the past, no doubt. But there's also no doubt that I've worked hand in glove with the President here. And he has been responsive to New York and responsive to New York's needs, and he's done it quickly and he's done it efficiently. I've literally had conversations with him in the morning where he turned around a decision by that afternoon. I've been in the federal government. I know what it's like to make a decision. And he has really responded to New York's needs. So keep politics out of it. Focus on government and focus on policy and keep politics out of it. It's very hard, especially at this time. And you start to hear this dialogue on reopening, and you start to hear people with political theories on whether we should reopen faster, whether we should reopen sooner, why are people against reopening, why are people in favor of reopening. That is corrosive and destructive, and if we don't stop it, it will feed on itself. There are no political conspiracies here. All the projection models have basically said the same thing. Everyone has basically said the same thing, which is, first of all, no one has been here before. Second of all, everyone, all the experts, I didn't have an opinion because I'm not an expert, all the experts had higher projection numbers than we actually experienced. And they all said, caveat, government action could flatten the curve, but we don't know what governments will do, and we don't know if people will even listen to what governments will do. But almost all the experts, when you go back and look at it, had the same basic heightened fears. From the New York State projection point of view, Columbia University, highly credible organization, 136,000, New York City only. McKinsey, great organization, 110,000 statewide, 55,000 on a moderate level. Gates, 73,000. Gates funded, IHME, 73,000 statewide. The Gates funded model, I think, is the one that the White House most relies on now, currently. All of those models were projections. They all said, depending on what people do, not even government, what people wind up doing. But it wasn't just these academic private organizations. The White House task force was talking about 1.5 to 2.2 million deaths without mitigation. With mitigation, they were projecting 100 to 240,000 deaths as the best case scenario. This is the White House task force. The actual estimate has now been adjusted down, but they're still at 60,000 deaths that they're projecting. The Peter Navarro White House memo was talking about loss of life, 1 to 2 million souls. 1 to 2 million souls, infecting as many as 100 million Americans. CDC was talking about 160 million to 214 million people infected. The whole population is only 328 million. So the CDC was projecting that more than half the population would be infected. They were talking about 2.4 million to 21 million people being hospitalized. We only have 925,000 beds in the United States of America. How would you hospitalize 2.4 million to 21 million people? And that was the CDC. So there was no political conspiracy theory. There is no political conspiracy theory. It's uncharted waters for all of us. So let's focus on the facts, let's focus on the data, and let's make decisions that way. And also, if someone says, well, CDC was wrong, and the White House Task Force is wrong, and Peter Navarro is wrong, and Columbia is wrong, and Cornell is wrong, and McKinsey is wrong, and the Gates-funded IHME, they were all wrong. If I'm representing them, I say it's too soon to tell. It's too soon for Monday quarterbacking because the game isn't even over yet. What do you think we're in? 6th inning for baseball? You think we're halftime if it's a football game? You don't know yet what the actual issue is going to be. And you don't know yet how this turns out because many decisions have to be made. You have to reopen. You have to decide how to reopen. You have to decide when to reopen. And that is going to be impactful. We don't know if there's going to be a second wave or not. All of these things are yet to come. So anyone who wants to say, well, here's the score at halftime, and I'm going to now claim that, try to collect my bet because it's halftime. It doesn't work that way. The game has to be over, and this game isn't over. What do we do now? Well, we need to do more testing and more advanced testing, and we have to do it faster. That's both the diagnostic testing, that's the antibody testing, but we have to get better at both, and we have to be able to create a higher volume faster. We have to be more prepared. We should never go through what we went through on this preparation drill. The federal stimulus bill is going to be key, and that legislation, in my opinion, has to be better than the past legislation. It has to be less political, less pork barrel, and more targeted to the actual purpose. You want to help the places that were impacted? I'll tell you what the federal legislation should do. It should repeal SALT. You want to help New York, which was the most heavily impacted? And by the way, you think you're going to reopen the economy without the engine of the New York metropolitan area? You're kidding yourself. You want to help New York? You want to help the places that are affected? Then repeal the SALT provision, which was a gratuitous, offensive, illegal, in my opinion, action to begin with, but which literally targeted New York and some of these places, Michigan, Detroit, California. repeal that if you really want to help places that are affected. And to my delegation, they know this issue very well, as does the California delegation, as does the Michigan delegation. That's what you can do if you actually want to stop with the politics and help people. In the meantime, here you're going to have many people who are struggling, many businesses who are struggling. We have government programs, yeah, but trying to access a government program is like trying to break into a bank sometimes, right? It's not that easy. The New York State court system and our chief judge is going to organize lawyers statewide to do pro bono legal assistance to help people with issues they may have housing issues, access to government program issues, et cetera. And many legal issues are going to stem from this in many places where people need help. So lawyers who have time on their hands, who are not working, they're looking for volunteers. And most of all, we have to think before we act. These are all big decisions. Reopening is both a public health question and an economic question, and I'm unwilling to divorce the two. There is no economic answer that does not attend to public health. In my opinion, you can't ask the people of this state or this country to choose between lives lost and dollars gained. No one is going to make that quid pro quo. I understand the need to bring back the economy as quickly as possible. I understand people need to work. I also know we need to save lives, and we have. And one cannot be at the expense of the other. As we look forward, I'm still troubled by what we just went through. If no one sounded the alarm in January and February, how do we know that it's safe to proceed now? There are stories and there is information that says some of these places that reopened too quickly are now seeing a growth in the number of cases. They're seeing a growth in the infection rate again, or they're seeing a second wave. So there's troubling signs on the horizon. And I want to make sure that we know this time that we've learned from the other experiences. And we're going to be putting together in New York a team of the best minds that look at what happened in Wuhan, look at what happened in Italy on the reopening, and making sure that what we're doing is based on all the science available internationally. And what is the probability, what is the possibility of a second wave happening? What is the possibility of people re-experiencing the virus? There's some reports from South Korea. Let's understand, because it's fooled me once. It's one thing to make a mistake once, but this nation should not go through it again. And before we make these decisions, let them be informed by the experiences we're seeing all across the globe. But there's no doubt that what we're doing now is as impactful and as important as anything that has been done. This is a time where our actions literally will determine life and death. I've been in government most of my adult life, on many levels, through many circumstances. This is no doubt the most important period for government in my lifetime. There is no doubt about that, the decisions that we make now. Also the potential for the decisions we make now. These are big questions, and we should think about them, both in the short term and the long term. How do we reopen? What do we rebuild when we open? How do we do it? Did we learn the lessons from the past? Did we learn the lessons from what we just went through? And are we the better for it? And do we take this moment and make it a moment of positive growth. It's transformational, yes, but are we fully experiencing the reality of what we went through, learning from it, and actually going to be the better for it? And are we doing that as a society, and are we doing that as individuals? I know the pain, I know the pressure, I know everybody wants to get out of the house, and they want to get out of the house tomorrow, and they want me to say, we're going to be reopening the economy in 2 weeks, and we beat the beast. The worst thing that can happen is we make a misstep and we let our emotions get ahead of our logic and fact, and we go through this again in any manner, shape, or form. So that's what we have to do. To all my friends, enjoy this Holy Week. I know it's different. I'm a former altar boy, and this was the hectic, busy week when you were an altar boy. You had Good Friday, Holy Saturday, tomorrow is Easter. For Christians, Catholics, it's a very high time of the Holy Year, Passover week, to our Jewish brothers and sisters. And it's, to say different, everything has been different, but not going to church, not celebrating, Palm Sunday was last Sunday, not celebrating Good Friday, Holy Saturday, Easter Sunday, is different and hard. But you know that it is the same message, right? Whether you do it from home, whether you do it over a television or through a computer screen, it's the same message. And if anything, that message is more profound during this situation than it normally is. New York pause. We paused. We slowed down. The activity level slowed down. You reflect more. You think more. And I think that's important during this Holy Week. In the meantime, you stay New York tough, which is smart, which is united, which is disciplined, which is loving, and we're going to get through this. Questions?
Governor, Mayor de Blasio canceled school for the rest of the year in New York City today. Can we get a reaction to that? And could that be a precursor of canceling school statewide, do you think?
Yeah, I understand the mayor's position, which is he thinks schools should be canceled for the rest of the year. When we made the decision to close the schools, we made it for the entire metropolitan region. Suffolk, Nassau, New York City, Westchester, Rockland. You can't make a decision just within New York City without coordinating that decision with the whole metropolitan region, because it all works together. So when we decided to close the schools, I spoke to Nassau, I spoke to Suffolk, spoke to New York City, spoke to Westchester, and we closed all the schools at once. Any decision to reopen them will also be a coordinated decision. The mayor has an opinion on New York City. Laura Curran, County Executive of Nassau, will have an opinion on Nassau. Steve Ballone will have an opinion in Suffolk. George Latimer will have an opinion in Westchester. But I want to coordinate all those opinions and reopen them at the same time. I'd also like to ideally coordinate that with Connecticut and New Jersey. So whatever we do all at the same time. So I understand the mayor's position, which is he wants to close them until June. And we may do that, but we're going to do it in a coordinated sense with the other localities. It makes no sense for one locality to take an action that's not coordinated with the others.
So is that action invalid?
Well, that's his opinion, but he didn't close them and he can't open them. It happened on a metropolitan-wide basis, and we're going to we'll act on a metropolitan basis, coordinated with Nassau, Suffolk, Westchester. And ideally, I'd like to coordinate with New Jersey and Connecticut if we can. The New Jersey and Connecticut coordination is not a legal matter. It's a mutual basis of interest. Legally, I want the metropolitan area coordinated. I don't want Suffolk doing something that Nassau doesn't do, that New York City doesn't do, that Westchester doesn't do.
But just to clarify for parents in the New York City metropolitan region who have kids in public schools, should they anticipate them going back to school, or is school off?
There has been no decision. That's the mayor's opinion. I value it. I value Laura Kern's opinion, Steve Ballone's opinion, George Latimer's opinion, but the decision will be coordinated among all of them.
Could you please speak to any more specifics about the outreach effort from the
Or
court
just
system?
because, so there has been no decision, Jesse, on the schools. I understand the mayor's position is also businesses will probably open in May. I respect his opinion on opening businesses in May. Again, no decision has been made on whether or not businesses will open. And we're not going to open any businesses in New York City without coordinating it, same as the schools, Nassau, Westchester, Suffolk, and again, hopefully with New Jersey and Connecticut. So there's been no decision on businesses. The mayor's position is they might open in May. I get it. Laura Curran has a position, Steve Ballone has a position. And on schools, the same thing. There's been no decision on schools.
Could you please provide any more specifics on the court's outreach efforts to pro bono lawyers? You know, what services are you wanting them to connect with, and when do you think those services could come on?
Look, you're going to have a host of legal issues that people need help on. You're going to have housing issues. We talk about these government programs, SBA has loans available. Yeah, look at an SBA loan application and tell me how easy it is to fill out. All these federal programs that have been set up. Yeah, but you have to figure out how to access each one. By the way, just accessing like the simple programs like the SNAP food stamp program, you're dealing with bureaucracies and applications. So there's a host of need on the legal front. We're hearing about it all across the board. The court system with Chief Judge Janet DeFiore, working with the New York State Bar Association, are just asking for volunteers, lawyers who are volunteers, to help with the myriad of issues. They'll coordinate it. They need the legal volunteers first, so they're asking for the lawyers to come forward, and then they'll put them together with the clients who come forward. Anyone have anything more on that? Mr. Robin?
Governor, was the extra 600 a one-time thing for those on unemployment, and also the 200 million you had announced for low-income households and food? How is that being distributed, and what can they expect?
Who wants to answer that? Rob?
The 600 will continue right through the period, through the 39-month period, and then potentially after December 31st, it could be an additional 600 after that, but we're waiting for that.
And the 200 million for the food and low-income households, how's that being distributed?
Rob?
Which 200, I'm sorry, which 200 million?
200 million that was announced yesterday or the day before for
The funding for
food.
the SNAP funding.
Oh, that's going to go through the normal process, through the normal program, through the agencies. That will all go out immediately.
Is that also backed up in a similar way to the unemployment system, or is that firing on all cylinders?
Separate, that's moving along. We haven't had any issues. That's moving.
Dan?
There was a poll a few days ago that basically said it's Fight Club for Growth, saying that Democrats want to see you replace Joe Biden on the ticket. I'm wondering your reaction and what you think of that. Would you consider doing that?
Democrats would like to see me replace Joe Biden on the ticket. That is, on one hand, flattering. On the other hand, it is irrelevant. But to the extent it's flattering, I appreciate it. And look, when I talked about keep politics out of this, everyone has been, I hope it's changing, but everyone has been very suspicious of government and government officials, politicians. It's always about their politics. They're always trying to take the next step on the ladder. Be very careful about what they say because nuance. They're deceptive creatures, politicians. I never felt that. I never believed it. But now it's more important than ever before that people understand there is no politics here. Sometimes it can work, and it can work right, and sometimes at a time of crisis, you actually see people who play to their strength. There is no politics here. I have no political agenda, period. I'm not running for president. I'm not running for vice president. I'm not running anywhere. I'm not going to Washington. I'm staying right here. I said to the people of this state unequivocally, when I was running for governor, I will serve as your governor. Well, they all say that, and then they do something different. Yeah, I'm not that person. I am going to do what I said I was going to do, because that's who I am. So that's what I'm going to do. Period. End of story.
People seem to really like you right now in terms of handling this fluency. If he offered you like DHS secretary, would you turn it down?
I was a cabinet secretary 20 years ago. Been that, done that, been that, there. No, thank you. I'm going to do what I said I was going to do. I don't know why it's so hard to accept from an elected official. They may actually have meant what they said and actually believe in sticking to it. No president, no vice president, no going to Washington to serve as the cabinet. I said I did it. 8 years with the Clinton administration. I loved it. It was a great experience. I was HUD secretary, Housing and Urban Development secretary, worked all across the country, worked in every state in the United States, loved the experience, but I have probably the most important job to me that I could have, and probably more important than ever before, frankly, given what we just went through.
Governor, can we return to your comments about the schools and businesses in Westchester, Suffolk, Nassau counties, as well as New Jersey and Connecticut? Will that also include state businesses and schools?
Well, two things. When we closed the schools, we coordinated it, not just in the metropolitan area, we coordinated it statewide. Because different school districts were doing different things, and you can't operate that way at this time in this situation. That's normally designed for local flexibility. A school district makes an individual decision with their calendar. Education is basically a local decision. There's a snow day in Buffalo. Doesn't mean that there's a snow day on Long Island. But this is different. You're asking a society to stay home, well, and close my business. That triggers certain questions. And there's a direct connection between schools and business. And the application does not follow geographic jurisdictional boundaries. So you live in Westchester. How do I tell businesses to close in one area unless I address all the issues in the surrounding areas, right? And the geographic lines between Westchester and New York City don't matter, and the lines between New York State and Connecticut and New Jersey don't matter. The workforce is basically a tri-state workforce. So coordinate school and business, and coordinate geographically, and make the decision based on the facts at the time. I reject any elected official or any expert who says, I can tell you what's going to happen 4 weeks from today. I reject it. I mean, you looked at all the models. So, I mean, I accept it, I hear it, but I'm not prepared to act on it. So I talked to all the county executives. They're all elected by their constituents. They all have an opinion. Some people believe the businesses will open in May, Mayor of New York City. Some people think we should open them in 2 weeks, New York City suburbs, hopefully statewide. And it's a little bit of a different situation upstate than downstate, and I hope it stays that way. Ideally, I'd like to do it with Connecticut and New Jersey.
So, just to be clear, though, are you saying that it's your legal authority to make the decision on New York City schools, not Bill de Blasio's?
It is my legal authority in this situation, yes. That's why when I closed them, we closed them statewide. It was not just New York City that we closed. We closed at that same time the island and the northern suburbs, and then we coordinated all of upstate. Is that right?
Yeah, and Jesse, remember when we did the executive order with the 180-day waiver? School districts need a waiver if they're going to have less than 180 days of school. And so we said that we're setting them all at the same time. Everyone's on the same schedule. New York Pause is extended through April 29th. Everyone's on the exact same schedule. And when we extend that, that's when we extend the 180-day waiver.
And it has to be coordinated. I don't see how, I understand the debate on when to reopen schools. I understand the debate on when to reopen businesses. I don't understand how you would start businesses in May, but not open schools until June, but keep schools closed until June. I don't get that. I think you have to coordinate the business with the schools, because schools do education. Schools also do daycare effectively for a large percentage of the New York City population. So how can you say to people, I think you're going to go back to work in May, but the schools are going to continue to be closed, so figure out what to do with your children during the day, but you're going to have to go to work in May. How do I go to work, but if my kids are home?
I guess the dissonance, though, here of the mayor of New York City saying the schools are going to be closed 2 hours ago, and you saying, no, that's not the case. I think for parents that might be confusing and unsettling.
Well, then we just clarified it.
Can you give us some sense of when that might be resolved, like a definitive
It's not
answer?
going to be decided in the next few days, because we don't know. I can't tell you what June is going to look like. I can't tell you what May is going to look like. No, but I can tell you it will be a metropolitan-wide decision. It will be coordinated with the business decision. It will be coordinated with the rest of the state, and it will ideally be coordinated with New Jersey. It will definitely be coordinated with New Jersey and Connecticut, because I'm not going to operate without coordinating with New Jersey and Connecticut. But ideally, it's uniform with New Jersey, Connecticut, because they're all connected, these things. School and business and geography are all connected.
Fewer hospitalizations, new hospitalizations reported. Does that mean that we need to change the plan for these planned field hospitals at this point?
There's no changing of the plan. I'm praying that we don't need a single bed in the additional overflow capacity. I hope Javits is empty. Well, it's not. There's several hundred people in Javits. But ideally, we never needed a bed in Javits. We never needed a bed on the U.S. Navy ship Comfort. We never needed an overflow bed in the field hospitals.
Mark Levine yesterday had noted that the reason that the number of new hospitalization is so low in New York City is because they're at capacity and people are being turned away. Have you guys heard?
That's not true. What is the theory, that people are going to a hospital and they're being turned away from the hospital?
People that would have otherwise been hospitalized a few weeks ago.
No.
And Joseph,
Doctor,
we do a daily call with the hospitals, and we get updates from them, and there's no reports of that.
Governor, we spoke to his office. Our staff has been speaking to his office. We explained the way we were doing this, which is we are using all the hospital capacity in the system, so people are moving around as needed. So if they're going, we're managing that process. So if there is a problem at one facility, we move them to another hospital. So no one is getting turned away. We are monitoring this on an hour-by-hour basis, exactly how many people are in the hospital. So no one has been turned away. I think he realizes that now, and he's been thankful, and we've been talking repeatedly to his staff, him and his staff, to make sure they understand where we are in the process of moving patients
also
around.
defies all logic, right? The high point of hospitalizations was 2 weeks ago. That's when we had the crush on the hospitals. If you look at that hospitalization chart, it was about 2 weeks ago, but 10 days, that's when there was the crush on the hospitals. We have been down on the downslide for a while now. So the hospitals are not, we have empty beds right now in hospitals over the past couple of days. They wouldn't be turning away anyone. And that's just, it's virtually an impossibility.
The state prison system is now quarantining prisoners who have, been infected with COVID-19. Can you speak to if the prison system actually has the capacity to do that, and how they might be doing that effectively or not effectively?
They can quarantine within the facility. You have a prison, but then you have distinct operating wards within a prison. So they have total capacity to quote-unquote quarantine within a prison system.
Update on whether or not you're, moving forward with any granting clemencies to anybody or releasing any further state
Not
prisoners?
anything new, no.
Thank you.
In terms of the parolee releases?
Nothing new.
So it's still about 240, is that right?
It was about 240. I know it was anticipated to grow to about 400, but I don't know that the numbers have reflected that shift yet. I can get you an update on that.
I'm just confused, Governor, because 5 minutes from here, 4 hours ago, Albany Med nurses went on the record in a press briefing stating that they don't have the proper PPE and that they're being told to ration and wear their PPE masks up to 20 times. And they say this is contradictory to what the president says, what state officials say, what hospital administrators say.
Well,
What is the response to that? I'm confused.
I only, contrary to what hospital administrators say, we ask every hospital every day, what do you need? We have been getting every hospital what they say they need. If there's a disconnect between the nurses and their hospital administrator, I can't help with that right now. But they should talk to their hospital administrator, because whatever their hospital administrator said they need, we've done. Thank you, guys.
Donations of ventilators, have any been effective? Are they all good for